And welcome into the Radio Days edition of Now and Next. This week, sitting at the round table on Moore in the Morning on News Talk 1010 Toronto.
The Free for All Roundtable. Round 1.
On round one, we have Tim Hudak, former leader of the Ontario Conservatives and now a partner with Council Public Affairs. Mississauga City Councillor Deepika Damarla is here, and Dave Trafford, Chief Executive Producer at Story Studio Network. He's host of On the Ledge, your Ontario politics podcast. Dave Trafford, somebody was speculating yesterday that with the provincial house continually out of session that you might be running out of material, but I can't imagine you'll ever run out of material on provincial politics.
No, there's always something to talk about. And in fact, what we find is that when the legislature isn't sitting, we probably get the juiciest bits because the premier's front and center, and he makes himself available to the media constantly. And yesterday was a very good example of coming up with plenty of fodder for the show.
Yeah, with Doug Ford, never rains, but it pours for talk radio. Let's start with him saying that students are studying the wrong things. He said, study something that's going to get you a job. Don't study basket weaving. Okay, let me start with Deepika Damarla. Is that a diss, or is there a core of reason to that?
I thought about it, and he's not wrong. I mean, sometimes he phrases things colorfully, but essentially it's what any parent would tell a child. Kids will do what they want, but you study where the jobs are, and I don't see what's wrong with saying that.
Well, it's an insult to basket weavers, I guess. Dave Trafford?
I just think, at some point, can we get out of the 1960s? That was an argument I heard when I was heading to high schools. Seriously, this does nothing to elevate the conversation or to put a point on the finer needs of what our, educating our youth and having a more educated population. I mean, that's the heart of a good economy, is making sure that we have well-educated people to begin with, and then we put them into the workforce. Critical thinking is what's important. It's not necessarily the specific program that you're taking that is going to make you smarter or better equipped for the workforce. So I just think that all of that, and just for the record, both of my kids majored in philosophy, and they are both entrepreneurs who run very successful businesses today. So it's got nothing to do with basket weaving or useless arts programs. It's got everything to do with critical thinking, and the premier really didn't express much of that in that statement.
Well, in Tim Hudak, it does reflect, I think, a certain perspective on education, which is that universities should be like vocational schools rather than a place where you would write a deep thinking paper about Dickens.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, Dave's right. We need to update that basket weaving analogy. But, I think the premier made an important point here. The province, the taxpayer through the province of Ontario, subsidizes post-secondary education significantly. I should say at council, we represent a couple of post-secondary institutions. But look, the tuition freeze has been there a significant amount of time. And that has meant less money coming into the system. So less investment into research, for example, less broad-basing programs. They're trying something new. And I think the premier's move, which increased funding to colleges and to universities, is capping tuition increases at 2% a year or, inflation, whichever is lowest. I think that still shows the generosity of the taxpayer while investing in our future.
The premier yesterday also grieving the fact that he wanted to go to the hardware store on Family Day, but it was closed. David Trafford, there are arguments as to why people would want to shop on Family Day, but maybe we don't need to shop every single day.
I would agree. I don't think we need to shop. I heard Preet on this morning. It's kind of nice to have that exhale and just, be able to breathe for that one day out of the year. I mean, there's 9 total statutory holidays, etc. But I just didn't understand, again, the premier's math on this. People want to work, they want to make extra money making $50 an hour. You're going to make $50 an hour at the hardware store? A nurse makes $50 an hour. So yeah, I'm not quite sure of the math
rich there. Okay. And Tim Hudak, I mean, I'd be very curious to know where the retailers stand on this, because I don't think people buy any more if you give them an extra day, but you've got to pay everybody to staff the place and sell the stuff that you could have sold the day before or the day after.
That's a great question. I looked at this issue quite closely when I was in politics, and I don't remember where like the Retail Council of Canada would be. I think different members would take a different viewpoint depending on, the kind of business they're in and what part of the province. I actually looked at this when I was an MPP, not while I was leader. And I've actually Doug Ford's point of view, right? If a business wanted to open, it should open. Yes, employees who are working on a stat holiday should get time and a half. They should get the extra benefits from that. But it also enables us as consumers, right, to figure out what's best for us in our families. Maybe that comes up from growing across the border, John, where it's a pretty regular occasion back in the day to hop across to go shopping on a holiday. But I'm with the Premier. Let the business decide, let employees decide, so long as they're compensated for working on that day off, and let shoppers shop.
Well, certainly, Deepika, I remember the epic crisis when we first started to debate Sunday shopping, and that does not seem to have ended the world.
It didn't, but I feel for the employees. I think if you were an employer, it's not a level playing field. Let me just back up, because, for instance, Square One gets an exception and it's open on Family Day, but all the other retailers cannot open. So from that point of view, I guess there's a little bit of an imbalance, and retailers might want to be able to compete with Square One on Family Day. So that's the owner perspective. But I think from a worker perspective, you just have to then go in. Yeah, you make time and a half, but the whole point of Family Day was you spend time with family. So I'm more inclined to say it's not the end of the world. Let's leave it as a holiday, and let's not force mall workers to have to go in.
Pierre Poilevre, somewhat uncharacteristically, speaking out about Jamil Javani and his trip to the United States and his thoughts after he came back from the U.S. And Tim Hudak, I'll start with you on this one. I appreciate this is a very inside politics story, but I think it also reveals kind of some tectonic plates within the Conservative Party and the Conservative caucus.
Yeah, I think you're reading that too broadly. I think this is more about an individual than plates shifting, John. I remember as a leader, I'd have these, with friends like these episodes, just when you're trying to go down a certain, path or message or policy, you've got somebody who's a hot shot that wants attention and goes out on their own. We've seen a distinct shift in Pierre Poilievre moving towards a more statesman-like approach to national issues, particularly the U.S.-Canada relationships. Jamil Javani goes down there, does his own show, goes way off message, right? What happens then caucus? People get pissed off. They say, hey, we're working towards a plan. You go out to get headlines on your own, and you undermine the entire plan of getting into government. So with friends like these, well, it's the old expression, right? When it comes to your caucus, I guess you keep what you were dealt, but man, some days you wish they weren't there.
Well, Deepika, I think it's Robin Urbach, the columnist who writes a column today that basically says Jamil Javani is all about Jamil Javani.
I think she nailed it. And my only comment to Pierre would have been, what took you so long? Giovanni was out of line on many issues, but the one that I think really, really upset me, and I'm sure many others, is you never, as an elected politician, trash your own country when you go abroad. You just don't do that. And so I'm glad that Pierre's called him out, but I think it took a bit too long. Should have been done right away. Or he should have told him, you cannot go.
Dave Trafford, I've often thought Jamil Javani probably covets Pierre Poilievre's job, so maybe that's why Poilevre is knocking him down.
Could be, but the Premier yesterday even said, nobody'd know who Jamil Javani is if it weren't for me. That is the Premier, because he was the one that gave him his first significant job. The question I have is twofold. First, it was Breitbart where this interview took place, and if you read the transcript or you listen to the podcast, the whole thing is bait. He's being baited entirely, like being led along and being able to kind of swarm in his own bathwater to be able to say, look at me, how downtrodden I am. I'm a black guy. I mean, he was really playing the victim personally as well. So he got baited almost, I think, if you check the tone of that podcast, into saying that, into the hissy fit remarks, into slamming the Canadian approach to all of this. So on the one hand, yes, I think Poilevre is bang on. Right answer, right time, move on, and that's the right play. But the other part of this is, where are all the apologists who came out of the woodwork, a week ago and said, they wanted Team Canada, but they don't want Javani and poor Jamil. The Conservatives are right in terms of saying, back off, arm's length. The adults are in the room, and we need to take this seriously.
Canadians, according to a profile today, more and more Canadians are struggling with their auto insurance premiums. And actually, Deepika, I'll start with you because this is an especially acute problem in Mississauga.
Yes. Well, I think you can draw a direct line from cops telling victims of car theft, oh, just report it to your insurance company, to where we are today. Because we've financialized a crime and we've just said, okay, your car got stolen. No need to report it to the police. Just go to your insurance company. And we see the results. And, it's very, very sad. Now, I'm not saying it's the only reason insurance rates are going up, but it is a big reason that we are here today, where it's ridiculous when I read that the car costs $10,000, but the insurance is $6,000 a year. And it just, I guess we really reached a breaking point, and the car thefts continue. I know that they've reduced from the peak, but, there was an article recently that between January 8th and early February, so in a month, 350 cars were stolen in Mississauga and Brampton. So do the math, that's 10, I guess that's 10 cars a day still being stolen. So, yeah, it's a problem, but the solution has to be we have to get a handle on this auto theft.
Tim Hudak, as a guy who's had 2 cars stolen, did your premiums go up?
Yeah, sadly, it seemed like robbery, right? We were robbed by the car thieves, and then it seems like our insurance companies put the gun on our back right after that. They gave us a ridiculous deductible when it didn't seem like it was our fault. So then we went to our former insurer and we did the shop around, and likewise, John, it was another example of highway robbery. So we shopped around. We took the advice that you hear from brokers, and TD, I will boast about that. TD gave us a much better deal. We switched over our business. Like you, we bundled to bring in savings at the end of the day. And I'll add one more comment to this. One of the issues I always liked when I was in politics was, technology you can put in your car voluntarily, right, to show how you drive. Do you swerve? Do you hit the brakes and the accelerator, erratically? And if you have good driving habits, I'd actually like to see us have the courage to embrace those, help people get down the rates that way. Does it mean bad drivers pay more? It does, John. That's a pretty, I think, significant incentive to encourage and reward safe driving.
Thanks to you all. We're at a racetrack, but good to have you. Tim Hudak, Dave Trafford, and Deepika Demerla.
Now and Next is an Eye Contact production.